Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak on this Environment Protection Sea Dumping Amendment, Using New Technologies to Fight Climate Change Bill 2023. As is often the case, it's a fairly cute title, because when you start saying that this is about new technologies to fight climate change, there should be a lot of more detail and some protections actually in the legislation. And that is a detail that's not there at this point, and I will get to that. So, for people listening or watching, the bill implements amendments to the international framework under the 2009 and the 2013 amendments to the London Protocol. The London Protocol aims to promote the effective control of all sources of marine pollution and take practical steps to prevent pollution of the sea by the dumping of waste and other matters. Now, I know for so many around Australia, but in particular in Warringah, the health of our oceans is incredibly important. We care a lot. We actually have the Sydney Institute of Marine Science locally at Chowder Bay doing amazing work in conservation and restoration. And so that health of the oceans is incredibly important. And I note that there, in fact, has been a call for there to be a Minister of Oceans, that we currently have a Minister for Environment, Water, but we don't have actually a Minister for Oceans, noting the incredible importance oceans plays in our environment and in actually setting the climate around the world. But this bill provides for the amendment of Australian laws under the London Protocol to allow for the issue of permits for the export of carbon dioxide streams of carbon. Now, we've heard a lot of members from government side talk, in fact, about that this is really about putting protections around marine geoengineering and all the other things that do come under this bill. But more importantly is the fact that it does permit carbon dioxide, the export of carbon dioxide streams for carbon and the subsea-level carbon capture and storage. And what we don't have in this, in fact, but there are a number of amendments put forward, is to provide the protections around that. If we want to be true to the title of this bill, to say that it is new technologies to fight climate change, then those amendments should be included and the government should be accepting them. Because at the moment it allows for carbon dioxide streams from carbon capture processes to be exported for the purpose of sequestration into subsea bed geological formations. The bill also allows the issue of permits for the placement of waste and other material for a marine geoengineering activity for the purpose of scientific research. These would implement the 2009 and 2013 amendments to the London Protocol. Now, we should say, for everyone's benefit, only 10 parties have ratified the 2009 amendment to the London Protocol, including Norway, the United Kingdom, Netherlands, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Finland, Estonia, Sweden, Denmark, the Republic of Korea and Belgium. And despite the name of this bill and using all technologies to fight climate change, as I've said, it is only with the amendments that it can actually do that. I have significant concerns that this bill, in fact, will be used to enable prolonged use of fossil fuels. For the past 2 decades, Australian governments have been telling us that commercial-scale carbon capture and storage technology is a legitimate way to reduce emission. That is a unicorn. It is a fallacy. It is foul. It is a myth peddled by the fossil fuel industry to justify their continued expansion. Despite tens of billions of dollars of investment, commercial-scale CCS has been a complete failure. Its exponents tell us we can keep burning fossil fuels and simply pump the emissions underground. It's as easy as that. Well, we know that commercial-scale CCS is a lie told by the fossil fuel industry and their political representatives to justify new planet-wrecking coal, oil and gas projects. Chevron used the lie of commercial-scale CCS to gain the social licence and approval for the massive Gorgon carbon bomb. Despite investing some $3.2 billion into what is now the largest CCS project in the world, recent reports show that the project's emissions have increased by more than 50%, with a sharp drop in the amount of CO2 stored underground over the last 3 years. But has there been any consequence for that failure to deliver the sequestration that was a condition and a part of the approval? No. Chevron was allowed to build its $81 billion gas export hub on the condition that it was capable of storing all the carbon dioxide from its offshore reservoirs and, as a minimum, implement all practical means to bury at least 80% of the greenhouse gas. In the 12 months to June 2022, Chevron injected underground just 1.6 million tonnes of reservoir CO2 and vented into the atmosphere some 3.4 million tonnes. And that is from their own report. In the 6 years since export of liquefied natural gas started from Gorgon, some 20.4 million tonnes of CO2 has been extracted from the natural gas piped from offshore to Barrow Island, but only 6.5 million tonnes is now stored under the island. This project is a case study of the lie that is CCS, and why I'm concerned that this technology leads to greater emissions by enabling the approval of new fossil fuel projects. And so if this legislation is used to facilitate that to continue, this is not new technologies to fight climate change. It is new technologies to lie and increase the risks and the consequences of fossil fuel burning and climate change. Now imagine the real impact that $3.2 billion could have had if it was spent on actual legitimate projects that actually get us off fossil fuels rather than this complex, fouling concept that allows gas companies to pretend that they're actually tackling their emissions when they're instead throwing accelerator fuel onto increased temperatures and global warming. There is a great fear amongst many, for example, that the Middle Arm project in the Northern Territory is the driver of enabling the fracking of the Beetaloo Basin, widely acknowledged as an absolute methane carbon bomb in the making. And the Middle Arm underpins the claims by companies advocating to frack the Beetaloo Basin that it will somehow get net zero gas. So this bill could further enable the dumping of carbon under the sea from carbon captured at Middle Arm from the process of Beetaloo gas. There's fears that this bill will enable the expansion of the Barossa gas field and the export of carbon dioxide to Timor-Leste to be dumped in the seabed in their waters. Santos is leading the development of Barossa, which has a high CO2 concentration of 18%. Santos has also depleted gas field in the Bayou Udan in Timor-Leste. So if Santos can, through this legislation, claim to be net zero by exporting the carbon emissions from the Barossa to Bayou Udan, they believe they will have social licence to develop the Barossa field. Yet, as the Gorgon experience has proven, this type of technology is prohibitively costly, highly ineffective, and does not deliver the carbon capture and storage that is promised. But it is continually used as this carrot and this justification for further approvals. Now, these fears don't come from nothing. The fears are the result of the language of members of the Labor Party continuing to enable and promote the expansion of fossil fuels. As the world burns, members of the Labor Party, including the Treasurer just recently, continue to peddle the dangerous lie that gas is somehow part of energy transition. It was highly disturbing to hear the Northern Territory Chief Minister this week frame projects like Middle Arm Gas Precinct as an opportunity for energy transition. These are gas industry talking points coming out of the mouth of Labor Party politicians. Such language can only remind us all of Scott Morrison's gas-led recovery and the Coalition's obsession with gas. It's this kind of pro-gas language that leads many people to the conclusion that, like Scott Morrison's Coalition government, Anthony Albanese's Labor government has been completely captured by the fossil fuel industry. It is deceptive and dangerous for politicians to continue telling the public that carbon capture and storage can offset new fossil fuel projects, especially its expansion of gas fracking and extraction. It is especially dangerous to continue these lies, given recent global air and sea temperature data, which appears to show that the world has entered a new phase of accelerated global warming. Using CCS to justify new gas projects at the same time as the UN Secretary-General says we have entered the era of global boiling is utterly reckless and negligent. Beyond the climate impacts, there are significant environmental concerns with this technology. The EDO submitted that the drilling and laying of pipelines in offshore locations may pose significant threats to the offshore ecosystems. In the event of leaking carbon dioxide from CCS activities, the environmental impact on marine environments could be significant. This would be compounded if prolonged leaks occurred or were inadequately monitored or managed. Leaking CO2 risks causing acidification of the water around the CCS site. CO2 leakages lead to CO2 dissolving into seawater and decreasing seawater pH, with the effect of acidifying the marine environment. Further, there are significant concerns about the lack of knowledge about the geoengineering in a marine environment. Ocean fertilisation could have unintended consequences such as ocean acidification, algae blooms and depleting oxygen in deep waters. These are just some of the concerns that the now Leader of the House expressed himself in 2013 as Minister of the Environment, arguing that they needed to be treated with great care, adding also that there was potential damage to human health. The health of our oceans is vital to the health of our planet. The Ocean Decade Leadership White Paper recently released found that the ocean is recognised as the new economic frontier, offering opportunities for economic growth, employment and innovation. However, unlike previously untouched areas, the ocean has not been spared from human impact. Stresses including rising sea temperatures, pollution, resource overexploitation, biodiversity loss, sea level rise and extreme weather events have only recently been understood and experienced by humans. We need to build this understanding before further altering the ocean climate nexus. Australia has a long history of advocating for carbon capture and storage on the international stage, due largely to the influence of the fossil fuel industry in politics here. No one can forget the recent stand by the Australian government under the previous parliament, sponsored by a gas company at the COP event. The 2013 London Protocol Amendment allowing this kind of experimentation was proposed by Australia and co-sponsored by Nigeria and the Republic of Korea on the premise that ocean fertilisation should only occur for legitimate scientific research purposes and should otherwise be prohibited. The government claims that this bill is necessary to assist Timor-Leste with their financial situation by enabling carbon dioxide to be stored in their waters as a future revenue source, or for that legitimate scientific research purposes. But there are no guardrails included in this legislation as it currently stands. It's somewhat ironic that we're concerned about future revenue streams for Timor-Leste in light of other allegations in this place. There is significant pressure from our primary gas export markets like Japan and the Republic of Korea to permit carbon capture and storage and sub-seabed sequestration, as the geology surrounding their countries is not stable enough to support it, and they face pressures to reduce emissions. Norway has established a separate law for subsea CO2 injection for storage, regulations relating to exploitation of subsea reservoirs on the continental shelf. This legislation has enabled Norway's Northern Lights project, which the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water has referred to as an example of how CCS is being considered globally. But specifically, it's seen as an enabler of blue hydrogen projects, something that, again, I fundamentally object to because it requires that continuation of the fossil fuel industry. However, we are going to enter an era where we have to talk about carbon drawdown. The truth is the atmospheric carbon dioxide already far exceeds safe levels for human civilisation. The Australian Academy of Science says that the world will need to remove greenhouse gases directly from the atmosphere in order to avoid the worst-case scenarios of global warming. Scientists and entrepreneurs are continuing to work on solutions to directly capture carbon from the atmosphere through a wide range of methods, including direct air capture, electrochemical approaches and biological approaches, to name a few. So the storage of carbon drawdown of existing emissions, and I say existing emissions, needs to be considered, and I believe that is where this legislation could have a role to play. But because we do need to start looking beyond net zero, considering, and we should have on the agenda, climate-positive outcomes. So we need to talk about greenhouse gas removal and negative emissions. But for that, you need to, if the government was legitimate in wanting to say this is about climate action, then the amendments proposed to ensure that these can only be used for greenhouse gas removal and negative emissions, not to be used as an offset or to justify any future fossil fuel projects or expansion of fossil fuels, then we would be able to believe the government.
I thank the honourable member for her contribution.